What is going on, everyone? I'm Devin, Ugland, and I'm joined by my co-host Ronnie Flores, and you are watching the Ballislife original show, On the Rise. Today, we're taking a closer look at Auburn's dynamic playmaking point guard, Sharife Cooper. Ronnie, I'm going to throw it to you. First of all, how you doing? And then give us the lowdown on Sharife Cooper's high school career.
Yeah, Devin, glad to be here with you. Glad to co-host this new On the Rise show. Obviously, season's going by fast. We're in a pandemic, so everything's thrown a little bit for a loop. And Sharife Cooper is one of those players who is thrown for the loop. So even though he's only played 6 college games for Auburn, he had a really decorated high school career. He's one of the most decorated high school guards really in the last 10 years. Out of McEachern, Georgia, Powder Springs, he had all the accolades and all the honors you could want. One of the few players ever to win National Player of the Year by, credible sources. He was the National Player of the Year in 2019 by USA Today and Max Preps. And that's just not something a junior or a non-senior ever really gets. And it's for good reason. I mean, at 6'1", 6 foot, he is a terrific player, and more than not, his team wins. That's what I like about Sharif. And he did that at the high school level. His junior year, he teamed up with Isaac Okoro, who's already making an NBA impact, for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and he led his team to a 32-0 mark, number 2 finish in the Fab 50 rankings. They were undefeated. He averaged 26.1 points per game, about 6 rebounds. He's a good rebounder, a little stronger than I think people give him credit for. 8.2 assists, 4.0 steals, and like I said, he led to winning. He was the MVP of the City of Palms, Bass Pro Shops tournament, and that's just his junior year. So when Okoro moved on to college. And, Sharif actually upped his scoring, so he can carry the load a little bit. 30.6 points per game. Again, his rebounds always been good, 7.8 rebounds and 3.6 steals. His team wasn't as good, and he didn't get the accolades as a senior, but I think individually he was even better, to tell you the truth. Again, as we've said before, 2 things we want to make the point of right away with Sharif is winning, leading to accolades, leading, and his production. Devin, what do you feel about his ranking, meaning his player ranking in that 220 class? And obviously that's an awesome class. This is going to be an awesome draft, I think, compared to recent drafts. But if you look at his consensus ranking, and if you look at there on his Ballislife profile, and you can see his composite ranking, Devin, why don't you give us a shoot down of his composite ranking and what you thought about it?
Yeah, so I think it was a little low, Ronnie. As far as composite, it was around 22. Am I right?
Yes. So, yeah, 22 on the composite. 247 is 27, 19 for ESPN, 20 for Rivals. And again, this is a strong class, that 220 class and the draft class of subsequently 1 year later is strong too. But what did you think about that? And do you think that was fair? Do you think he was grossly overlooked? Do you think he was in range?
I would have had him higher just based on what I saw, and kind of based on a lot of the things you said about his leadership, his ability to make his teammates better, and just how important that point guard position is now at the college and NBA levels. So yeah, I think that 22 is a little low on a composite. And you said 247 was at number 27, which is he's definitely a top 25 talent in that class. But as we know, Ronnie, rankings don't always tell the whole story. A lot of things are taken into consideration there that are non-basketball related, as far as size, length, athleticism, things like that. And Sharife Cooper, as far as those things go, he doesn't have that size, length, and athleticism that we're used to seeing for, NBA projectable guards. But as you've seen in his 6 games at Auburn, Ronnie, I'm going to run through a couple of Auburn stats. He's done a nice job of really just taking over the reins of that team and having them in a position to where he's elevating the overall team and making guys around him better. That's because he just has an overall poise for the game. And I don't want to get into too much of our breakdowns, because we're going to save that for our breakdown, which is coming up right now, Ronnie. So Sharife Cooper, full breakdown. Let's start with your strengths of Sharife Cooper, then we'll go into mine.
Yeah, for Sharife Cooper, first thing that comes to mind, like you said, a clutch shot maker and a leader. I think that makes a big difference. When you look at Auburn, people were kind of saying, now it's obviously became a cute thing to say free Sharif. He's well known. His sister's an NBA player, a good NBA player, WNBA player, and she's becoming a well-known figure in basketball. So obviously that free Sharif, but there's more to the free Sharif thing than just that. Obviously, he's had to sit out as the NCAA was, clearing his amateurism in the college ranks. But I think people want to play with him, number one, and they know if he's practicing or in pickup, he's making that team better. So I think that played into it a little bit too, because people are going to Auburn or they are wanting to play with Sharife Cooper, meaning his teammates. And I think that's a big plus, wanting to play with him, making his teammates better. He can get to any spot on the floor. I mean, Devin, I can't remember a player right now coming into the college ranks from high school that had total command of the ball and body control. And at the same time, now there's some guys that had the body control, like a Drew Holiday, and there's some guys that have command of the ball, but he's very few have both that. Just like that old adage, he's always looking up, ready to set up teammates, knowing what play is, could kind of visualize the next play ahead, as most very good college point guards can do. He knows where to feed his teammates, and I think that gives him a lot of confidence. And I think some of that makes up for the fact, like you said, his physical size or his physical attributes. So, you can't, that seems to translate. It's translating so far in his college career. I always thought it would, whether seeing him for AOT on the EYBL, he was very dominant on that circuit, which is top to bottom, the top circuit to play on in the grassroots level. And he did a terrific job, and I don't see him doing anything different. I see him actually improving between now and the end of the season because of COVID and because of his NCAA eligibility issues. That's a big layoff. I don't care who you are. If you're not playing in a structured game for, 6-7 months, that's going to affect you.
For sure. Yeah. And just to, touch on your points as well, pace, feel, and IQ for the game are the three things that stand out to me most about Sharife Cooper when I watch him play. Like you said, setting up teammates, always looking ahead, ball handling, ball control, and just kind of feel for the game and knowing where guys want the ball and where they can be successful, and delivering passes on the target, on the mark, and making sure his guys are in position to be successful. Like you said, he's averaging 22 points, almost 8 assists, almost 5 rebounds a game, Ronnie. Those are impressive numbers for a 6'1" guard in the SEC and playing against the kind of competition that Auburn plays against. He alone can control the flow of any game at any point. He can push the pace in transition, make a high-level decision. He can operate out of high ball screens in the half-court setting, which is really what the NBA is all about right now with point guards, right?
Yeah.
High ball screen, get into the paint, mid-range jumper, or kick to a 3-point shooter. That's what it's all about. And at a high ball screen action, he has great change of speed, change of direction, creativity with the ball, and the ability to kind of manipulate the defense with the dribble. And that's what
not a lot of players can do that. That's a good point. Manipulate the defense with the dribble, because most players then tend to over dribble when they try to do that.
Yeah.
And like you said, a good trainer or a good scout or a GM is gonna say, when Sharife Cooper goes into motion, like, as a great player, he's 99 out of 100 times making the right play, making the right decision, whether it's dish, finish himself, draw the defense, then kick. He's usually making the right play, and I think it shows in his stats. Now, like any young player, he could probably cut down on his turnovers here and there. I think his ratio is about 2 for 1. As you mentioned, his assists were over 8, and I think his turnover right now is about 4. But that's, again, 6 games in, so he doesn't have a huge sample size at that level, but he's already showing the intangibles, showing the things we saw in the highlights earlier to what he's doing at Auburn, what we saw, what he did with AOT and what he did with McEachern. It's not, that part is not surprising. I am surprised that where he did finish in that class based on what we just talked about. And I think he's going to move up in this draft more than he's going to either curtail or just stay put.
That's an interesting point. And I think the reason why he's going to rise in the draft is because he's so good in the ball screen action, whether it's coming around turning the corner, coming over top of the ball screen and getting 2 feet in the paint and finding teammates or throwing a lob, or the split, right? The split is super important now, especially at the NBA level with the spacing. You give Sharife Cooper space to operate, and he is going to cause your defense fits. Yeah. Let's transition into Sharife Cooper's areas of improvement. Ronnie, what do you got on that?
Yeah, as like I said, as we saw in those highlights, you can see what he can do good. and obviously a highlight video will make, you'll see some shots go down. So if you look at his EYBL stats, and obviously he had good high school numbers, but Devin, in 13 games in 2019, he shot 44.3 percentage from the field goal percentage. And his 3-point percentage actually went down from the year before to 32.4%. Just at his size and what he brings and how much he's going to have the ball, I just think that's going to be the main crux, or the main thing people are going to watch going forward the rest of the season, and in his workouts and anything else leading up to the draft, COVID pending. And hopefully they have a normal draft process, unlike the last year's draft. So that's going to be important for Sharif, I think, to show that he can knock down the perimeter shot, show that he can improve. Because Devin, even as we're speaking, I think he's really, either he's not taking it or people are getting the scouting report. Obviously, the scouting reports get better, and they're much better in college, because he hasn't been hitting the three for his last 3 or 4 games at all.
Yeah. And that's the biggest concern for me with Sharife Cooper is 3-point shooting, because we know how important it is in the current state of the NBA and how the game's being played. Being a small guard, you've got to be able to shoot the 3-point shot, or Ronnie, you got to be able to shoot the mid-range game, the midi pull-up, right? So sure. You outlined his EYBL numbers and touched on his college numbers. Straight up, he's shooting 18% from the 3-point line in college, 5 for 27 overall through his first 6 college games.
And I only think he's made one like in the last 3 or 4 games.
And if you think about the difference from the college 3-point line to the NBA 3-point line, while it might look small on paper, when you look at the difference in feet or inches, I mean, it's a huge, huge difference. Guys get longer, guys get more athletic. Guys,
the quality of the defender is just going to be much better. And
much better.
They're going to have more intel on him. His strengths, his weaknesses, his tendencies are all going to be known.
Right. So you think about, guys are going to kind of sag off, and guys are going to allow him to shoot that 3-point shot when he gets to the NBA until he proves that he can make them at a consistent, 38% clip, which is, a solid clip for an NBA 3-point shooter, right? You want to be over 40, but if you get to 38, that's you. The defense has to respect you behind the arc. So
over time, yes.
Over time, when we get into the high ball screen action and how he's gonna play with the ball in his hands and coming off the screens, the mid-range pull-up is going to be really important for the development of his overall game and his longevity in the NBA, because
he can over penetrate. He's probably one player that can get away with over penetrating. Sure. Kind of like I wouldn't say, because he may not be this good, like a Kyrie Irving, or a guy who can get into the lane and it's okay once in a while if he over penetrates. But yeah, he's gonna have to stop and pop, shoot, like you said, that mid-range game. Obviously, one of the guys who's done it the best and done it at a Hall of Fame level is Chris Paul. And Chris, he wasn't a consensus number 2 player in his class. Obviously, LeBron James was the best player in his class. But they had that similar frame, and you saw him develop that. And if he can get an inkling of that, it's going to help him along to stick in the NBA.
Yeah, a lot of what I'm seeing on Twitter, or what I'm seeing or hearing in broadcasts of Auburn games I watch, are a lot of Chris Paul comparisons. And sure. Chris Paul is a Hall of Fame point guard.
Yeah.
One of the best floor generals, passers, highest IQ players I've ever seen on the basketball court. And
take no doubt about it.
While that's a fantastic ceiling for a young player, and really a great honor to be named in the same sentence as a Chris Paul, I'm going to taper my expectations a little bit lower than that.
So you ain't going to go on the rise. You're not going to go 2-2 on the rise there.
I'm not going to go that far on the rise. I do see where those comparisons come from, because he does have a great command for the game and for the position, and he does similar things as Chris Paul.
At a similar size.
I get it. It makes sense, but until he develops that knockdown 50 to 55% mid-range jump shot, the giant killer, or a really impressive floater, I think he's going to struggle to finish around the basket like he does at the college level in the NBA, sure, because of the athleticism and the rim protectors, right? So I looked at some Synergy Sports stats, Ronnie, and off of ball screens, Sharife Cooper takes the ball to the basket, literally like into the paint to the basket, 60% of the time.
Yeah, that's
out of 60% of his ball screen actions, he's going to the basket 60% of the time. So
a huge stat that stands out.
Right. So with his lack of vertical explosiveness, he doesn't have that Russell Westbrook explosiveness.
No.
He doesn't have the De'Aaron Fox explosiveness where he's rising up and dunking.
And he's not that big to begin with.
That's what I'm trying to point out. You see a lot of De'Aaron Fox or, similar comparisons like that. Athleticism wise, he's more like Chris Paul than he is Chris Paul or a Mario Chalmers or a Mike Conley Jr. than he is like a De'Aaron Fox.
And that's what we're here for on Rise, to give you a more realistic comparison. So Devin, as we get into this next segment, future forecast here on the Rise, give us your 2 or 3 comparables that you think most make sense, and then we'll get into where we think he fits in this draft.
Okay, so let me go with the lower end comparison first, Ronnie.
Sure.
Kind of a Jordan McLaughlin, Tyler Ulis. I think that's a floor. That's a very bottom. Jordan McLaughlin undrafted, but he's making his way into the rotation for the Minnesota Timberwolves. He's undrafted at USC.
I don't think are very surprised by that.
But I mean, honestly, Ronnie, Jordan McLaughlin is very, very underrated. He's a very, very good basketball player. He's
pretty athletic.
Yeah, he was dunking on people in high school. If you remember, we watched him a lot at Awanda. He can get up and dunk on people. But just from a standpoint of game managing, control, pace, IQ, they're similar. My next level guy that I think it could be like is Jeff Teague. Jeff Teague now with the Celtics, but he's a 11, 12, 13-year NBA player, one-time
Don't seem like it yet, but it's moving on. And like you said, he was the 19th pick in the draft. You give us Jeff Teague's, since that's your mid-grade comparison, give Jeff Teague stats. Let us know how good of an NBA player is before you young kids start saying, "Oh, Jeff Teague, oh no, he could be like CP3." Give the people the rundown of how good Jeff Teague is, so they can see why this comparison makes sense.
Right, career numbers on Jeff Teague are more impressive than you would imagine. Right, 12.4 points per game, 5.7 assists per game, a one-time All-Star in 2014-15. In a season in which he averaged 15.9 points and 7 assists per game. Those are really impressive numbers when he was with Atlanta, Ronnie.
I know Omar Cooper, his dad, Sharif. Now he has a big, he really loves his son and puts him out there. If he got those numbers, I'm sure his dad would be like, "That's pretty good."
So Jeff Teague went, let me count here, 1, 2, 3, 4 straight seasons of 15 points or more. 16.5, 15.9, 15.7, and 15.3. That's
like a good ceiling to me.
As a quote unquote undersized, or Jeff Teague 6'2", 6'3", as a quote unquote undersized guard in the NBA in the current way that it's being played, those are really, really nice numbers, Ronnie. If Sharife Cooper, again, a lot of people who watch this, I'm sure are going to be like, Jeff Teague? What are you talking about? This guy's like Chris Paul, De'Aaron Fox, all these superstar type players. Kemba Walker is another guy who I'm seeing is some comparisons. Those are superstar NBA players, right? Perennial all-stars. Quit
reading so much Twitter, I would tell them.
I know, right? I get where they're coming from. I see it. I understand why those are being compared. Like those are the comparisons. But for me, as far as like a safe NBA comparison, I think Jeff Teague's a nice spot. And Ronnie, I'm going to throw it back here. Yeah. I'm going to throw it way back here for you. Yeah. This is my ceiling, my highest peak on Sharife Cooper in my comparison, Rod Strickland.
Yeah, wow, that's an awesome comparison because it's something I thought about a little bit. I thought, well, maybe that's pretty high. In my opinion, Rod is probably the best player never to play in an NBA All-Star game. He's better than Jeff Teague.
I'm nothing
against Jeff Teague. That's just the truth. You know what I mean? And he's like I think he's an NBA player's player. And what I mean by that is Clyde Drexler kind of said that one time, is like, I even like watching Michael Jordan play. So I think other point guards like watching Rod Strickland play. Like he was that good. And if, he just that total command of the ball, you talk about how the ball on the string, knew where to set up teammates, like they made it look easy at his size when it really wasn't that easy, could finish in traffic. I think a lot of things we saw Sharif do at McEachern and a little bit now at Auburn, Rod can do that in the NBA. So we'll see if Sharif can do some of that stuff in the NBA, finish with the acrobatic, shots, the low percentage layups, kind of like almost a hybrid of what Jordan McLaughlin could do a little bit, what Kyrie Irving could do, and obviously what Rod probably, did the best. So, and the most consistent. Obviously, he played in the NBA 17 years. So,
17 years.
And it's very, very interesting, Devin, as we look at Mike Conley and it's a solid comparison, a little bit more stable, maybe
Sure.
better shooter. Again, Sharif has to pick up that shooting. Is that Teague was drafted 19 and Rod Strickland was drafted 19 overall. And as I look back at Rod coming out of DePaul, he, there were some issues that how's this guy going to fit in the NBA? He's a street ball player from New York. Maybe he's a little uncoachable. Some of those things kind of creeped in a bit. Again, wasn't as much information out back then out as there is today, but I did remember hearing things like that. And he obviously went on to have a very good career. So I'm with that. I like the Casey Hill. I don't know if he's explosive. Is the former Florida Casey Hill player. I think I like that from my low. The body control, the command of the game. I kind of like Shaheen Holloway and Omar Cook. Obviously, those guys weren't, I know Sharif has a higher, confidence level in the South that he's going to be better than those level guys. Tai Lawson's another one I thought of. Tai Lawson's strong. Maybe Sharif's not as strong, but if he can have a good career like that, I think that's where my mid-range is. I'm with you on the Jeff Teague. And if he can get to that anywhere near Rod, I think he's going to be a hell of a pick and a hell of a player. So based on that, Devin, based on the fact that he was a consensus number 22 pick, or 22 player in that 220 class, Teague went 19, Rod went 19. Let's give it our future projection. What do you think so far? Does Sharif fit in at 19? Does he fit in higher or lower?
Right now, the way it's trending and the way he's playing and how well he's performing on national stages with people watching, he's trending higher than 19 right now. Okay. I don't think he's a top 4 pick, because I'm going to go in order. I'm going to go based on right now: Evan Mobley, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Suggs, and number 4, I'd probably say either Jalen Green or Jonathan Kuminga, depending on how that G League Ignite team pans out, and how those guys play during the G League bubble.
Yeah.
I think he's in the 12 to 20 range, Ronnie. I think right now he's more closer to 12 to 15, depending on who's picking. But if the NCAA tournament happens and Auburn's able to get in, a consistent amount of games over the remainder of the college season, and he ends up shooting 12% from 3, I mean, he's at 18, so there's a legit chance he could shoot worse than 18% from 3, but he could get better. Who knows?
That's going to be the big thing. Because again, if we watch the highlights, you saw the highlights on this segment, you see how good he is with the ball, and it's just, we got to point out some other things. I think he can work on the defensive end. I mean, just like some of these other young guys, a little bit more. We talked a little bit about that in some of our other breakdowns from last year's draft with Anthony Edwards. We both agreed that Anthony Edwards was a number 1 pick level talent, but we just thought he needed to be more engaged all around, and especially defensively. And I think that's coming to fruition. And I think Sharif is a hell of an IQ player. If he can do it on the offensive end, kind of get the soldiers around him to believe in him, and he can do that defensively, I think too. It's just a matter of him doing it. And like you said, he's got to get that 3-point percentage ball up. I'm with you there. I think 12 may be a little high. So I know you're going on the rise. I'm going to come bring it down back a little bit lower on the low. So I do think, 16 to 20 is good. I think if he fits in there, because there's so much premium on size. We've talked about that before. We'll continue to talk about this as we do more on the rise and we profile more players. But when you look at player rankings over the year, there's very few players under 6'2" ranked anywhere in the top 15. In fact, on a future segment, we'll break down some of those stats, the actual stats of that. And then, I think that preludes right into the NBA draft. You just don't see that many small guys going that high.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to remember the last, 6'1" guard who went that high in the draft. I mean, you might have it on top of your head, but
the guy I think of right now is obviously the guy out of Chicago, the Hall of Famer, Isaiah Thomas. That's 40 years ago. He was number 2 behind Mark Aguirre, number 2, and he behind his good friend. But who in between there, we're really going to have to dig, and that's the whole point.
Kemba Walker, coming out of UConn. I think Kemba Walker was a relatively high pick in that similar range.
And we did mention Mike Conley. Now,
Mike Conley was 4th. He was the 4th overall pick.
And he got a huge contract, one of the hugest ever in the history of the NBA. So I think he did show his time over Memphis that he was probably worthy of that, because I think people coming out were like, oh, he's riding Greg Oden a bit. Oh, you know, they went to the NCAA final. I don't know if he's that good, but he's a very good guard overall in the last 12 years. So my thing with Conley and a couple other guys we mentioned is the size we keep talking about. We're talking about the shooting. We're talking about the size. Mike Conley's a solid player. He's probably 6'1", 6'2". How big is Sharife Cooper? Are we gonna, when we come down to the measurables at these drafts, is he more towards 6 foot or 5'11"?
I'm gonna go on the low there, Ronnie, and talk. We're gonna go 5'11".
Yeah, so that's a bit.
That's a
testament to his talent.
It is. It really is. Being that small and being able to do what he does in the paint without being able to shoot the basketball quite as well as he would need to as a small guard. But you look at Mike Conley's college stats, his one season at Ohio State, Ronnie, 39 games. Obviously, they went to the NCAA final with him and Greg Oden, 11.3 points, 6.1 assists per game, and he shot 30% from three. Okay, so let's go to current day.
Yeah, that's not great.
No, it's not great. So he came into the league, Ronnie, as a 33% three-point shooter his rookie year in Memphis. Right now, in Utah, 18 starts, he is shooting 41.9% from three, and career, he's a 37.7% three-point shooter. And that's that number I said, Ronnie, 38%.
Yeah, so that's the thing you were talking about. You got to get that 18% up to 25. If you can get it to 25, you get it to 30.
Yeah.
And as you see over time, Mike Conley's just gotten it better and better.
Yes.
The games I remember when they had Zach Randolph and that team that was good with OJ Mayo, when they were making their little playoff pushes, he could shoot. They were lagging off of him. He can shoot. So that's where Sharife Cooper needs to go with the projection of his career.
For sure. Yeah, I'm in that 12 to 20 range, depending on how that 3-point jump shot comes along here in the latter end of the college season. And Ronnie's in the 16 to 20 range. So we're close. We usually agree on a lot of stuff. We're relatively close on that one.
Yeah, it's pretty close, but those few picks are going to make a lot of difference because of the talent in this draft. I think this draft's pretty talented, and I think it's going to be a lot of on the need, what you need. I don't think it's going to be so much the best player available at every pick because there's not a whole lot of NBA starting level talent. I think Sharife Cooper could be an NBA starter. And that's a hell of a pick at, 15, 14, 13, whatever it is he ends up at. Because if you look at the top, and you mentioned it a little while ago on the show, Evan Mobley, Jalen Green, Cade Cunningham, it's going to be hard to go wrong. It's just a matter of what you need. So yeah. I think with Sharife Cooper, it's going to be what you need. I think if you look at him at 12, it ain't going to be because you think he's the 12th best player in this draft. I think you're going to be because you want him at 12 because you think he's a hell of a point guard and you think he can contribute, more than in some years, you just take the best player available.
For sure. That's a good point to end on there, Ronnie. We appreciate you guys checking out the very first episode of the Ballislife original show, On the Rise. Make sure you stay tuned for our next breakdown of Chet Holmgren of Minnehaha Academy, our very first high school breakdown of this show. And obviously, while you're here, while you're watching, make sure you go over to the In the Paint show on ballislife.com and listen to our In the Paint podcast, where we kind of just, take a look at the broader scope of basketball. But until the next episode of the On the Rise show presented by Ballislife, Devin and Ronnie are signing off.
What's up, Ballislife fam? Thanks for watching this video. If you want to support the movement, make sure you check out the product listing below this video and cop some of this merch.